It's 21 minutes after the hour. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. Good to be with you today. Hey, I'm playing around my port operator here on the other side of the glass. We got a great conversation coming up. I'm going to invite you to join the conversation as well. We're going to take a look at our country, take a look at our nation, where we're headed, and ultimately maybe where we came from. What is the solution to the problems and to the ills of our country today? I read a great article. In fact, you can check it out on two places. It's posted at the Edmund Burke Institute. You can check them out at edmundburkeinstitute.org or go to the Relevant Radio website. If you go to Relevant Radio, keyword is Drew. There's a link. We've got a bunch of links that are on my home show page here that tend to deal with a lot of the issues that we cover within the show. Check it out. The link will read, "How Can a Divided Nation Become One?" Great article by Dr. Grace Vuoto. And I want to talk a little bit about that because we all know the promise, don't we? We know the great promise that this current president offered America, and America was mesmerized. They were hypnotized. They were fired up with this hope and this message of change, this message of unity that the Obama campaign put forth. And yet today we still see, I think, a great divide in our country. As Dr. Vuoto points out, we're no longer a nation of just liberals versus conservatives or Republicans versus Democrats, blacks versus whites, or Muslims, extremists versus moderates. But we're much more, we're a very, very divided country. And joining me now to share some of her insight is the founder and the executive director of the Edmund Burke Institute. It's a Washington-based think tank. And Doctor, it's always good to have you with us. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Drew. It's such a pleasure to be with you and to be with your awesome audience.
It is. I love this series. Our Graceful Heritage, our series continues here, and you can check Dr. Grace out every 2 weeks here at this time. And Doctor, picking up today on how a divided nation can become one, let's look at where we are right now. There's been a lot of talk of racism in our country as of late, a lot of division within the Tea Party, and as you point out in your article, there's a lot of division amongst different groups, whether they're conservative or liberal or Democrat or Republican. The list goes on and on. Our president ran on a platform of hope and change and unity, really, and yet we really haven't seen that, have we?
That's correct, Drew. And I think he's been spoofed quite a lot for not fulfilling his promise to bring hope or real change. But remember that one of the key things that he did promise was unity. And as a reporter at that time, I was working at the Washington Times, and I was covering the campaign very closely. I even went to his rallies. And I, too, was mesmerized in this sense. I was mesmerized by his soaring rhetoric when it came to the promise of uniting Americans. I was really delighted to hear a leader talk about the importance of easing all of this social tension that existed. It was really refreshing, it was reassuring, it was soothing, it was calming to hear a leader who wanted to achieve that. And I had hopes, despite knowing his radical agenda, I had hopes that perhaps he could fulfill some of these promises. And one of the key elements that he was touting, remember very, very clearly that he presented himself as a Christian man. He was under attack over and over again. Was he a Muslim? Some people asked him. And he explained again and again that he had converted to Christianity, that he held to those values very dearly. And he indicated that it would be his self-proclaimed and open acknowledgement of his Christianity that to some extent would be used to help heal the nation, in the sense that he would be appealing to the fact that we are all, created equally in the eyes of our Creator.
Well, 85% of the country declares themselves to be Christian, or at least to profess a belief in Christianity. I mean, it's a wise political move, I would think, to say that you're a Christian. Share with me or explain to us how our president failed in this quest to begin a new era in American politics. He had a great opportunity to change this country and really build a phenomenal reputation, but as you point out, I don't think he did so.
Exactly right. And he had campaigned then not only that he would unify us along Christian lines, but that he would also unify us along the fact that he would govern as a bipartisan leader. No sooner did he come to office than it was very apparent that he didn't care about bipartisanship. He immediately put on his extreme left-wing hat, and he began to rule as one who was far to the left, even further to the left than the Democratic Party had been in the Clinton era. So he basically deceived the electorate, and he deceived even his own party. And the more that he governed to the left, the more he became at odds with the people. Instead of leading them towards unity, what happened is there's a whole mass movement that emerged, the Tea Party movement, which was saying, hey, you're not only leading us towards unity, you're actually governing against the wishes of the American people. We never signed on to this Obamacare legislation that means that the government would have such sweeping powers over our economy. We never expected you to incur these massive debts in attempt to revive the economy. We never expected you to try to enact this radical foreign policy where you're apologizing to the rest of the world for American foreign policy. And we never expected you to essentially try to institute such crazy, extreme, left-wing ideas in every institution in America, including the military, including abortion on demand. It just seemed that everything that he did had an eye towards advancing an agenda that was not based on consensus as he promised, but he actually chose all the items that were the most polarizing of all.
So you really believe that it was an ideological move by the president, that this was his agenda from the very get-go?
Well, I think that that's exactly what did him in. Had he governed based on what he campaigned on, I think he might have been a truly transformative and maybe even an admirable president. Because the nation at the time was thirsting, as we saw by the tremendous reaction, the tremendous enthusiasm that he generated. The nation was thirsting for the things that he said.
Absolutely.
They really were. And I can tell you this, I was one of those rallies, and I remember that he was late, then the candidate at the time. He was late to arrive, and I was in a stadium in Baltimore. I was just amazed. He was about 2.5 hours late, and nobody seemed at all impatient. And when he arrived, they cheered so wildly, enthusiastically for him. And I remember thinking then and there that the Republicans would be doomed, just because of the discipline that I saw amongst the people waiting to hear him speak.
Well, I saw it coming anyway. I mean, when a man can captivate the nation with those speeches, that Yes, I Can speech I often talk about, the one in New Hampshire that he delivered, so powerful and so eloquent. Of course, he delivers these off a teleprompter, but still, America was captivated. He even had some high-profile Catholics who got on his bandwagon as well. I knew it was. I knew he would be victorious in that last election. It's interesting.
Exactly, and Drew, when he spoke about change and hope, many, if you look at his speeches very carefully, a lot of that change and hope that he was referring to was he was presenting himself as the father of the true American heritage.
Or at least aligning himself with it, because, he went back and he talked about, the slaves that made their way through the Underground Railroad. He talked about women and the ability to vote. And he went through these whole things, very passionate speeches, but he made himself, at least in these in the campaign speeches he delivered, that this is the next chapter in the greatness of American history. When we come back, Doctor, we can talk a little bit more about this, because there are parallels that we see between where our nation is today and ultimately what happened in the early church. Plus, we'll take your calls. You can join Dr. Grace Vuoto toll free here at 877-ROAM-777. We're back with more conversation right after this.